All right, let's begin. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hari Om to everyone at Chitrakoot as well. Last time we went halfway through chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. We'll finish up the summary of the rest of the chapter today. So incidentally, our starting point is going to be where we did the lead and repeat today in the assembly. So what is chapter 4 about? Chapter 4 goes through many different topics. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly the chapter is about, but it's the glory of this knowledge. This knowledge which is the highest, which promises me the greatest benefit, which is the end to this cycle of birth and death and birth and death. This is that one thing that can stop it. The greatest knowledge. Now it's funny, something that is the most supreme even has to be glorified for me to take it seriously, for me to take advantage of it, right? It's like when we go to diamond mining. I have a friend who's, he's from South Africa. So diamond mining is really big there. To go through that process, because what we see at the stores are the nice shiny diamonds, and we buy them and we wear them. But if we go to the real diamond mines, it doesn't come out looking like that. When they first get it out, it's caked in dust and mud and everything. It looks very lackluster, completely lacking in luster. And they go through, they refine it, they sand it down, they polish it, then you see the shine coming from it. So even for something as shiny, as beautiful, as elegant as a diamond, until it goes through some kind of glorification process to really shake everything else off of it, it doesn't shine unless that happens. Now, this knowledge is self-evident. There's no veneer or any kind of layering on it that needs to be taken away. Yet, like if a diamond were stuck in the mud, we don't take this knowledge seriously until it's glorified. Bhagavan Sri Krishna says the same thing here. So first, after starting to glorify this knowledge, he says, I, personally, have taught this knowledge from generation to generation. That Arjuna, you may see me as flesh and blood, Krishna, your cousin, yet I am nothing but that Paramatma. Please take me seriously as well, is what he beseeches Arjuna. And so the knowledge comes forth. Now at this point, in the middle of the chapter, I'll elaborate on what was explained in the assembly today, where after going into karma, vikarma, akarma, right action, vikarma, wrong action, akarma, renouncing from action, Bhagavan Krishna says the wise one is he who recognizes inaction in action and action in inaction. Seems like a paradox, kind of an oxymoron there. Where what his point here is, whatever a person does on the outside, their behavior, their movements, their conduct, that's not indicative of the level of knowledge in them. Puja Gurudev gives the amazing example in his Logic of Spirituality that if someone's realized, is it like they have horns on their head? Where, I have 4-inch horns on my head, so I'm like, Adha realized. 8-inch horns on my head, I must be like a Saptarishi, like super realized at that point. Thank God it's not like that, or else we'd value and judge each other based on the height of the horns on our head. Knowledge can't be assessed that way. Again, if we can't look at a Mahatma's conduct and say, this must be a Mahatma, this must not be one because of the way they act. There are some Mahatmas who engage themselves in austerities, where they stay away from all worldly affairs, completely content being by themselves. Like a Tapovanji Maharaj, Puja Gurudev's guru. Then juxtapose that with Puja Gurudev himself, who traveled the world about 12 times over. 1983, he suffers his 3rd heart attack of his life, at the age of 66. And after the surgery here in Houston, after he wakes up, he rubs his palm together and he says, Narayana is giving me 10 more years to live. Let's see how much work I can do. That was in 1983. He lived exactly 10 more years until 1993. And every minute after that, spent only in this Loka Sangraha, benefiting the people through teaching this knowledge. So we can't peg a Mahatma and say that this must be realization, this must not be it based on their outer conduct. It's what is their level of knowledge. Do they know what their identity is? Or are they deluded like the rest of us? Now when it comes to action in inaction, it's where even if I make the choice not to act, saying I will not contribute, even then that's a choice, therefore there's intention behind it, therefore there's consequence that accrues from it. It's an egocentric desire that I'm acting upon. That is an action at that point. All of you are doing action in inaction today. Where is your patriotism? There's a match going on, such a big one. Instead, here you are at Satsangh. Instead of rooting for the team and willing them to victory, doing that action, you're lazy coming here to Satsangh. Sharam nahi aati aapko. No, I appreciate that you came, or else it would be an empty hall. That's what I expected, an empty hall today. Fully mentally, I was prepared for that. I would just stare into the camera, look this way and that way, acting as if there were millions of people here. I expected no one, actually. So I know, chapter 4 is the magic number, 273 is the number in our head. I know. So thank you for showing up despite everything going on today. So action in inaction. Now the converse is inaction in action. Inaction, space, in, space, action. Where even when that wise person seems to be engaged in feverish action, whether it's teaching, whether it's building people up, service-oriented projects, whatever it may be, at their core, none of these actions are done born of any egocentric desire. They simply are done for the well-being of the people. Therefore, there has no consequence to it because it's not acting on a vasana. That's no action at all at that point. So the outer conduct of a person is no indication of their true intention, their true feelings, or the presence or absence of knowledge. So the only person who can know if realization has occurred is that individual themselves, where that very individuality is no longer relevant to them. Now, there's a further elaboration in the following shlokas that they abandon the fruits of action. Their undertakings have no desire or selfish purpose to them, and they go through life in that way. And the way they react to situations as well, there is no oscillation of mind when good or bad things happen. Good or bad really is just whether it's conducive to me or non-conducive to me. There really is no good or bad outcome if I think about it. It's just the effect of what my karma is, a consequence of my own actions, whether they're good, whether they're bad, beneficial, not beneficial. That's how I look at it through the lens in my mind. Not an objective understanding at all. Now comes the famous shloka. Brahmarpanam brahmahavihi brahmagno brahmanahutam brahmaiva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina. Chanted right before taking a meal. Now, there are so many shlokas that we have in our pantheon of scripture. When it comes to mealtime, why this specific shloka that's chanted then? The meaning is Brahma Arpanam. Brahman is what is offered. Brahman, that supreme reality. Anything I offer, anything manifested, is nothing but a product of that reality. Therefore, Brahman is what is offered. Brahman is the clarified butter, ityadi, all the offerings that are made. By Brahman is that thing offered in the first place. Without that ultimate reality, there is no action to be done of even making that offering. That's also only that Brahman. What it's being offered into, in any yajna, there is that sacrificial fire. That fire itself is also that Brahman. Only possible to partake in it because of that ultimate reality. And that Brahman to be reached meaning understanding what my true nature is by that person, Brahma Karma Samadhina, the person who sees this Brahman, the ultimate reality, in every action that's done. Only they reach that understanding of what their true reality is. So no wonder it's chanted during meal times then. That which nourishes me, that which sustains me is that grossified food. I'm alive because of it. I persist because of it. That is nothing but that reality. I have to remind myself of that every time I do this mundane task of pampering this body by feeding it. The supreme reality is all that exists. This is simply a temporary vestige that falls away when this food is not offered. That's that constant reminder that has to be there. Now, we come to the next part here. Very interesting part, 25th shloka onwards for several shlokas. What are the different yajnas that are described here? Yajna, if we were to translate into English, we loosely translate as sacrifice. Something that is offered for some purpose. So here what do we find? Daivam eva apare yajnam. Daivam eva apare yajnam. That those yogis, some of them, they only offer yajnas to the gods, to the devas. Pitrupaksha just concluded. So to the Pitrus, to the other devatas they offer it to them. Some offer sacrifice of the self, where in that quest to have this knowledge, they offer sacrifices that may this knowledge come to me, may this knowledge come to me. There are others, Shrotradin Indriyanyanye. They offer their senses as a sacrifice then. Those that engage in monavrata, meaning not speaking. Those that engage in fasting, not eating, perhaps during Navaratri time. Or we eat more sweets during Navaratri. Whichever way we go, both are a tapas actually, if you think about it. But for those that engage in that fasting, then controlling those senses for a certain period of time, that is a sacrifice they're making to keep that mind on the divine. Now it's important to see, we'll come to this when we come to tapas later on in Bhagavad Gita, that yajna is not to be overdone, especially something like fasting. Or else we fall into the situation where, Monday for Surya Bhagavan, I fast. Tuesday, Hanumanji, I'm a bhakta of his, I fast that day as well. Wednesday for Devi, yes, we must fast. Thursday for Guru, can't eat on that day. Friday, another form of Devi, have to fast. Saturday, again, Surya Bhagavan. And by Sunday, if I'm alive, I fast for one other form of divine again. Tapas, which hurts this body, that kind of austerity that hurts me physically, is tamasic tapas, not to be done. That which is not ordained by Shastra. Does Shastra ordain sense control by not eating at certain times? Yes, it does. But overdoing it and saying this is my tapas, that only leads to hardship for me. Whenever we have the YEP course, the Youth Empowerment Program for the Yuva Kendra members, whenever they come, Swamiji would always tell them, if you're a volunteer who's cooking in the kitchen, do not do any kind of fasting during your time here. You're over a hot stove all day long, 3 meals a day. If you engage in any kind of tapas during that time, it's already like 110 degrees here in Dallas, you will pass out. Do not do it. Invariably, there's always one person who says, how can I give up my tapas when I'm here? They do fast, and by evening time, like an evening sunflower, they're just down like this. So tapas has to be intelligent in time, place, circumstances. How do I follow it? So some offer yajna in the form of sacrificing, pleasuring the senses. Others offer different other things. Dravya, tapaha, yoga. meaning people offer wealth, people offer self-restraint. These are other ways of doing tapas. Now, one other ultimate tapas is svadhyaya. Svadhyaya means study of the scripture. This part sounds counterintuitive. But how can study of a scripture be seen as tapas, austerity? What do we have to give up to study scripture? So much. There are 1,000,001 other things I'd love to do on a daily basis. Instead, making that effort to study the Shastra, that's an opportunity cost, a sunk cost of not doing something else. Furthermore, it requires an intellectual mindset to be able to do it. Where, when things don't make sense, do I try to make logical sense out of it, or do I just abandon it? When I open up a book and I see a book that's this thick, Gurudev's commentary, does the size of the book scare me right away? Or do I have the courage to try to go through it? Because when it comes to knowledge, the truth is, if I completely stay ignorant, away from the knowledge, I can be blissfully happy. They say ignorance is bliss for a reason. The moment I dive in even a little bit into this knowledge, doubts start to come up right away. Why am I living the way I am? Why is it that everything I perceive, Shastra says it's not real, let go of all attachments? I don't want to hear that. I want to stay ignorant and blissful, yet the moment I dive into the Shastra, all of these questions seem to come up. It's like in school, when there are two students, especially at the high school level, take the same exam. One of them has studied hard for it, the other has not studied anything. The one who has not studied at all, they may have every answer wrong, but they're at the level where they don't even know they're getting it wrong. So they walk out of the room happily. Nothing can bother them. Whether it's right or wrong, they don't know at that point. The person who has studied, they'll walk out very bothered because they've gone through everything. There are those 1 or 2 questions that give them trouble that stays in their mind and eats away at them like a termite. Isn't that true? Am I talking to people that studied or not studied? Who am I talking to here? For the person that hasn't studied, I walked away really happily each time until I got the grade back. But until then, I was really happy. But the person that has some exposure to the knowledge, some understanding, they understand how much they don't know. I was talking to one of our Balvihar graduates recently, just the other day. And his view, I said, you're in college now. How about you join our chick sessions? And the usual answer is, no, Hariji, I don't have time, this and that, this and that. I say, no, we're meeting on this time on Saturdays, an hour in the morning. Don't tell me you have class at that time. Don't tell me you're studying at that time. Wake up and come to chick class. Why not? Then the truth finally came out. He said, my view is the people that go to Balvihar, they don't learn to think for themselves. I'm a free thinker. I think for myself, therefore I don't want to attend any of these things. Interesting. So, svadhyaya, study of any kind of scripture, has devolved to the point we think if someone is initiated and fully steeped in this knowledge, wanting to learn it, that must mean they're being brainwashed. That must mean that they really have no desire to think for themselves. They're just like cows going on this journey. Then one of these shlokas in this chapter disavows us of that notion. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. What is the greatest seva I can do to the Guru? Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena. First part is tad vidhi pranipatena. Offer your full prostrations to that master, to that teacher. We call it Sashtanga Namaskara. Sa Ashta Anga Namaskara. What are those various angas that touch the ground? In a full Sashtanga Namaskara. The knees, Janahu, they'll be on the ground. Elbows will be there as well. The entire torso, chest. So there's 7 limbs like that. What's that 8th entity that's also prostrating to that Guru? ahankara. That sense of individuality is that final limb. That's also bowing down to that guru. Meaning, it's not just a physical exercise that we do stretching our backs. It is to signify that to this guru, I'm offering my very intellect at that point. Not in some groupthink fashion, not a cultish way, but that I know that I don't know everything. Hey Guru, please mold my intellect so that I may reach the height of understanding what my true identity is. That humility has to be there then. So, tadvidhi pranipatena, that's part of it. Pariprashnena sevaya. Prashna, asking questions. Pariprashna, keep asking questions more and more. That is the greatest seva you can do to a guru. Doesn't make sense, does it? Pestering someone with questions, how is that the greatest seva? If that were true when your kids were toddlers, they were the greatest sevaks of you guys then, right? Why, mom, why is that like this? Why is that like that? Every kid asks that. The guru's very role and duty when they take on a student is, I will teach this knowledge no matter what. The more questions I get, the more I want to teach that student. Whether it's our acharyas, the brahmachari training course, whether it was Puja Gurudev, whether it's Swami Sarveshananji, so many of these swamis, you see how physically tired they are after a full week of work, a full day of work, a camp, a project, whatever it is. You see them just physically tired out. At that moment, if you're talking to them about something mundane, some kind of gossip, they don't like that. They'll kind of shoo you away. Some faltu topic, they don't want that. The moment you ask a genuine question about the teaching in some way, and I've seen this in all of them, no matter how fatigued they are, their eyes light up right away, and they are so eager, ready to explain and get rid of the misconception in our minds. This is what they live for. Every other thing that's done, every other kind of conversation, every other sorrow they have to listen to and palliate, whatever it is, those are all on the periphery. What matters most to them is this knowledge, and if someone asks them about this knowledge, there's no greater joy for them than that. In Kathopanishad, we find that young boy of 5 years or so, Nachiketa, approaching Yamadharmaraja with all these different questions about what that highest reality is. And Yamadharmaraja is in ecstasy at that moment, saying that, someone finally came to me with these kinds of questions. Having a student like you is my bhagya, my great fortune. Let me answer your questions. He marvels at the student's questions at that point. That's the beauty there. So, pariprashnena sevaya. But what's the nature of asking these questions? That's also important. I think I mentioned it once a couple weeks ago. There are certain, being here, born and raised in this city, and being a part of this very mission center for 26 years now, it's a blessing and a curse in different ways. Right? The most basic one is, I know the people. The curse is the people know me. Right? That's one right off the bat. Another one is that I know the same people for the past 26 years. That's also a good thing and a bad thing. Right? One thing I've noticed is there are certain people, any Swami that comes to Swami Sarveshananji, and when he was Uddhav Chaitanya before that, and sometimes even to me now, for 26 years, they've asked the exact same question again and again and again. I mean, consistency is beautiful, but not in all things, right? Same question, again and again and again. There's several reasons for this. One is, I want the answer I want. I haven't gotten it yet. So until I get that answer, I'm going to ask the heck out of this question. That's one. The other is, my question is so brilliant, just me knowing it's brilliant is not enough. I need everyone to know how brilliant my question is. I will ask it publicly as many times as I need to let people understand how brilliant I am. Another reason could be, this is my way of testing this person on stage. How much do they know? How much do they get stumped with these questions? Another reason is to troll the teacher. If you don't know what troll means, ask your kids, okay? Your teenage kids, ask them what troll means. I can't explain it in basic, it's too much of a, it's almost a Vedantic word. Troll is a combination of insulting that person, plus glorifying myself, plus doing it in a witty way, plus the public adulation from it. All of that put together makes that 5-letter word troll. So sometimes I ask questions with that intention as well. That's not what's meant by pariprashnena sevaya. Not for some personal gain there or some kind of blockage in my head I'm not willing to get over. Is it a genuine question for my spiritual growth? Or am I simply asking just to ask a question? Now, I'm not discouraging you from asking questions at all. In this setting, any question is welcome. I'm talking about what it said in Bhagavad Gita as that seva for the Guru is those kinds of questions that elicit an answer that'll help me on this path. Look at the Upanishads, for instance. The quality of the questions that are asked. Because every major Upanishad we see is simply a dialogue between the teacher and the student. Those being documented, they are codified as the Upanishads. You look at Mundaka Upanishad, what's the question? The very starting question there. That, hey Guru, I know all these different types of knowledge. Jyotish Shastra, Vyakarana, Nyaya, Niti, all of these different types of Shastra. What is that enabling me to learn everything? What is that spark of life, knowing which I have the capability to know everything else? Thus begins Mundaka Upanishad. We look at Taittiriya Upanishad, where he says to the Guru in the Bhriguvalli that this grossified body, I know it's not me. It ends at a certain point. This mind that I have, I know that's not permanent either. Thoughts ebb and flow. There's different emotions going on all the time. Same thing with the intellect. What is it that is behind all of this? What is that permanent entity? That must be my identity. Please tell me what that is. Thus begins Taittiriya Upanishad. We look at Prashnopanishad. 6 students come to a guru saying, we have questions. He says, whoa, hold up. Do a year of seva at my ashram, then start asking questions. They do that, purifying their minds in the process. Then they start asking. The quality of their questions is amazing. Now, the sad thing is, I could beat my head around for years. I would never come up with the questions of that caliber. My questions are, what is my next meal? What does that person think of me? What do I say in the next lecture? Those are my questions that I have, not these high-level questions. The benefit and the good fortune I have is Shastra is available for me to study. That svadhyaya I'm able to do. Great people in the past have asked these questions and they've been answered, and those answers have been commentated upon, and those commentaries have been spoken upon. Let me drink from that nectar. That's the great fortune I have in this life. Now, going further here. When it comes to glorifying this knowledge, we have to understand how systematic Shastra is. Because one criticism we often hear about Sanatana Dharma is, it's not like we have one book, there's so many. You have the Veda, culmination of Veda, the Upanishads. You have the history and chronicle of our culture, that's the Purana and Itihasa. Then you have a lot of Bhakti Granthas, Prakarana Granthas, which are introductory texts. All of this is there. One lifetime isn't enough to study these. Therefore, I won't waste my lifetime on studying these. We've heard that view before, haven't we? So, understanding that all Shastra essentially is pointing at the same thing, there has to be some systematic way of understanding that. So there is a structure in place then. In analyzing any type of Shastra on this supreme knowledge, the first thing we look at is Upakrama, Upasamhara. Upakrama means what's said in the beginning of this text. Upasamhara, what's said at the end. Looking at Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we're still in chapter 4, believe it or not. Way early on. Here it's saying, tyag karo, don't have attachments, detach from the world, don't get up and down with the world's up and downs. All of that's given clearly. By the time we got to 18th chapter, What if Bhagavan Sri Krishna said, just kidding, attachment is okay? How would we feel? Why did I go through this whole thing in the beginning then? So, upakrama, what's said at the beginning, has to match upasamhara, what's said at the end. It cannot contradict each other. They have to verily say the same thing. That's the first part. Second part in analyzing Shastra is abhyasa. What is repeated again and again? Those of you who send your husbands to go get groceries, all you have to do is tell them what you want and they get exactly that, right? The right brand and everything. Right? Thumbs up? No? Okay. All right, wow. Those of you sitting next to your husband put the thumbs down right away. That's awesome. That's pretty cool. I love the honesty. They don't get it right. You have to tell them again and again. They've been buying the same groceries for 20 years. They still mess up, don't they? Yup. Your kids. It was in my house, the thing was, when you get out of the shower, please stand on the mat that's there and dry yourself. Don't, get everything wet everywhere. Is that a challenge you have with your kids as well? Yup. You've been telling them for what, decades or years? Yeah? It's still an issue, isn't it? Abhyasa, things told again and again, do not sink in. For something basic like a grocery list, if that abhyasa has to be done again and again, it still doesn't sink in. This highest knowledge of my true identity, how many times must that be repeated? It has to be a constant loop in my head then of what this knowledge is. Because whatever we repeat to ourselves or hear in Shravanam again and again, that's what makes an impression, a wrinkle in the brain. When we were at Sandipani Sadhanalaya, Brahmachari training course, for many decades, Sandipani was established in 1965. For many decades, the ashram sat there in Powai. All the surrounding area was just forest land. So you'd see wild animals and things like that. By the time my course started, the way it was situated, one side you have the Renaissance, a 7-star hotel. I didn't know they had more than 5-star hotels. It's one of the only 7-star hotels in Mumbai. It's on one side. The other side is the slums, directly on the other side. So you see how the haves and the have-nots, how they live. So in that ashram then, there's so much noise pollution coming from the slum side and from the 7-star hotel side. And you can tell where the sound is coming from based on what the sound is. They'd have these big weddings here. So one night I'm taking a walk. I'm like, it's a live show. Someone is singing. That voice sounds familiar. Why do I know that voice? When I go up to the terrace of my dorm, it's a Sonu Nigam concert going on in the 7-star hotel next door. So I got a free concert that night. I took my chair up there, I sat on the roof, and I watched him perform. Right? Free concert. If it's free, I stayed the whole time then, just so I could get the most of it. So different string quartets would play there. I think international musicians would come and play. So sometimes we'd get to hear that. On the other side, the slum side. Whether it's a wedding, a birthday, a funeral, Deepavali, Ganesh Chaturthi, whatever it is, there's only one song that they play. That too, a keyboard recording. What song? Mere angane mein tumhara kya kaam hai. No matter what the event is, that's the only dabba music they play in the slum area. That's all we would hear. So I'm trying to study at nighttime, right, before I go to bed, studying the bhashya for the next day. That's what I hear at night. Now, when you wake up in the morning, this is abhyasa. This is done again and again. Navaratri, 9 nights. That's all we hear from there. So abhyasa, when something's repeated again and again, it makes a wrinkle in the mind, right? So in the morning when you wake up, especially wanting to lead a spiritual life, Shubha Vichara is something you want to have. Some divine thought in the morning. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, something like that. Bhagavad Gita shloka. When that comes to your mind upon waking, thinking of that divine, that sets a good divine day. Instead, what happened to me? Several mornings I'd wake up, in abhyasa from the night before, I wake up, the first thought is, Jiski bivi lambi uska hi bada naam hai, right? Abhyasa does that. So if it's nonsense that I'm hearing again and again and again, that's all that's going to enter the mind. The output is also that. Having that thought in the morning is bad enough. What's worse, as I'm walking to class to Vedic chanting, 5:30 Vedic chanting, I'm walking there. What am I humming to myself without even knowing it? That's what's going on in my head as well. In an ashram of all places. Because that's the ahara, that is what the senses are taking in. So abhyasa, that repeated statements that we find in the Shastra, as I internalize them, that becomes my reality eventually. So upakrama, upasamhara, beginning and end have to match. Abhyasa, having to pinpoint what is repeated again and again. Third is apurvata. To study Shastra, apurvata, what is it that is unprecedented in this Shastra alone that I can't find anywhere else? This is an important one. Because oftentimes it's fashionable in today's world to say that all these different religions out there and different philosophies, they may have different names for that divine, call it Allah, call it Jesus, whatever you want, they're all pointing to that same thing. Whatever path leads to the same place, we have different stories and morals and this and that, but the underlying ethos of every religion is the exact same. They come from the same starting point. Have we heard that before? Have we believed that before? Apurvata here is telling me that what is contained in the Shastra of Sanatana Dharma, the very crux of it, is found nowhere else. Confidently we can say that this idea that I am Sat, existence, Chit, the consciousness principle, Ananda, unmitigated bliss, that is my true identity. We find that contention found nowhere else, except for the Sanatana Dharma Shastra. Based on that logic alone, we can't make that frivolous, flippant statement that all of these religions say the same thing. This is something we only find here. That is the specialty. That's what apurvata means, the specialty. So another way to analyze Shastra is to find that thing which is nowhere else. That is this divine knowledge of what my true identity is. That's where this glorification of this knowledge comes. Now, the fourth entity, phalam. What is the result of studying this knowledge? That also has to be known. Why would I embark on this yajna and this tapas of studying this knowledge if I didn't know what the effect is? It's a shot in the dark at that point. Why am I doing this? Oh, I don't know. Everyone else does it, therefore I do it too. Half the world lead that kind of lifestyle, doing what they do. This knowledge has to be different from that. Now, what is the phalam? What is the fruit guaranteed to me if I go through this knowledge? If I understand this knowledge in all its glory, in all its intention, there is no rebirth for me. There is no more sorrow I face by taking one more birth. That is what is guaranteed upon understanding this knowledge. No other endeavor, no other kind of knowledge, nothing else guarantees me this kind of a result. This is the only thing that gives me that. Then one more fifth way of looking at this Shastra, arthavada. Meaning this knowledge is praised, eulogized. That's what this fourth chapter is. A glorification of this knowledge, that's an integral part. That until someone else, it's like bandwagon fans, right? Until someone else praises something, I don't understand the value of it. There's one parent who's talking to me, saying, all the other kids are studying, they're playing all of these things. My daughter, all she does is draw pictures all the time. I think it's a useless talent. It's not like she's going to become like a Picasso or something. It's a useless talent. There's no benefit from it. Okay, that's your opinion. And I went to their house one time, just walked by their coffee table. I saw these drawings there. These were the most amazing pencil drawings I've ever seen. This is like maybe a 15-year-old girl. The pencil drawings look like they're 3D, like they're jumping out at you. Pictures of people, buildings, all of these things, just with graphite. That's all it is. It looks so real. And I said, okay, you must really love art. Is that your passion? She said, yeah. She ended up being an award-winning artist, where she entered competitions, all of this, and she was renowned in her city for her art. So Then when she got that award, then the father was like, oh, this is a good talent to have. Meaning, until someone else praises a certain art form or a talent or a avenue of knowledge, I don't see the value in it. Just like bandwagon fans in sports. It's almost 15 minutes left. I still haven't given a sports reference. I have to give one, right? There are those people, their favorite team is whichever team is winning at the moment. So they're never sad. They never have to go through sorrow. Like, I've learned more about life, and because kids these days don't understand hardship in life, let's be honest. Especially in our Indian American community here, hardship is, me included, hardship is not something we know. Just by virtue of being a Dallas Cowboys fan, I know what hardship is. When false hope turns into nothing. When earnestness and eagerness and promises of some great nectar that we can drink as fans together evaporates right before our eyes, year after year after year. When those who are the custodians of excellence, like Jerry Jones, renewed every single year, dig us deeper into a hole while they line their pockets. And like peasants, we sit there and cry watching our TVs every year. That's taught me more about hardship than anything. So when a team finally wins, the Cowboys in my lifetime, maybe they'll win. Before I get dementia and go senile, hopefully they win so I can remember it. But when they do, how much will I appreciate it at that moment? Because I stuck with that team the entire time. Now, there's those people who are bandwagon fans. If not this team, whichever team makes the finals, they wear their shirts and they root for them. They're happy every single year. Whichever team wins at the moment is their favorite team. Like that when it comes to this knowledge. Am I a bandwagoner? Do I take this knowledge seriously when others take it seriously around me? Then I say, okay, this knowledge is good. Or am I one that says, even if people have no interest in this, the people closest to me, let me have an interest in this knowledge. That's what Arthavada is there for. Eulogizing this knowledge to convince me that it's worth embarking upon. So these are a few markers, ways that we analyze Shastra. It's called Mimamsa. Reverential analysis is called Mimamsa. Why did I bring all of this up then? Just to show that in glorifying this knowledge, it's easy to be intimidated by it at first glance. Such big books are there, such complex logic is given, I'd rather not embark on it. But if we really look at it, any kind of Shastra follows a systematic structure where the beginning has to match the end. There are things that are repeated again and again for emphasis. That is the crux of what the knowledge is. There's a specialty in this knowledge where I can't find these points anywhere else, therefore making it something I have to learn only from this Shastra. And it's eulogized as well. There's praise for it from the source teaching it. Plus, there's fruits of learning this knowledge of what's guaranteed for me as I embark and go through it. That's the promise. So when all that is there, how can the contention stand that those that study this knowledge don't think for themselves? In Sanatana Dharma, if we embark on this path, verily it forces me to think for myself. Pariprashtena Sevaya is just that. Until you are intellectually convinced of what is being said, do not rest with your questions. If they are genuine, if they are intended to help me in my growth, ask away, let me plug in, dig until I get those answers. In the early days of Sandipani Ashram, in the 60s, there was a water shortage. So the engineers came and they said to Puja Gurudev, there's no real water base anywhere here. Even if we erect a well, there's no place we can get water here. The engineers told him that. Puja Gurudev just kind of stroked his beard and said, okay. Then one day he walked to the outskirts of the ashram. There's an area no one really went to. There, he said, dig right here, you will find water. So reluctantly, they dug. They found a bountiful abundance of water there that supplied water to the ashram from then on for many years. So he would use that same, when he'd walk and see students studying in those first few batches, he'd say to them the same thing he told those engineers. Dig until you strike, is what he'd tell them. meaning with your questions, with your logic, dig until you get to that nugget of wisdom. Do not stop till you get there. Leave no stone unturned. So he goes through all of this. Now the last point to make today is what? 39th shloka. We find the fruit of this knowledge is that understanding my true identity, there is no birth again. But what's the biggest quality, the starting quality given here? Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Labhate jnanam, the one who earns this knowledge, only comes from Shraddhavan, the one who has full faith in it. Because we live in a world of skepticism today. Why just today? It's been out there throughout history. So whether it's youngsters in our Balavihar learning this, or college students, some of us even, our idea is, I have no blind faith in everything. Let me be convinced that this knowledge is true, then I'll go into a study. But the catch-22 is, unless I accept certain concepts as the truth, right off the bat, there is no growth I can make in my study of Shastra. Going back to the example I gave of the people that asked the same question again for the better part of 2 decades, some of the tenor of these questions is, how can Bhagavan exist if I can't see him? How do I know there were past lives if I don't remember them? How can you say that the intellect is not a permanent entity if I use it at all times? These kinds of questions. The reason they persist year after year after year is because there is no basic Shraddha in what the Shastra says. Shastra says this idea, concept, the very nature and lakshanas of this Bhagavan, that's something beyond perception. Shastra is the only place I find evidence of that and any description there. Verily has to go by Shastra. If I discount that and my starting point is my starting point for decades, saying how can this Bhagavan exist, I stay in that rut right there. Either come to the logic, accept it, and move on to greener pastures, or I'm stuck at that place in the beginning. So, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Some Shraddha is needed on this journey. Where is my approach that I'm going to learn this knowledge with the attitude of, let me poke holes in this knowledge? Or is it from the standpoint that what Shastra is saying is true, let me raise my intellect to meet Shastra where it is? If it's not that second attitude that I have, there is no growth for me in this path. Now, does that go against every skeptic manifesto we've ever seen? Yes. Apurvata though. This knowledge is special. It requires a special approach as well. Having that Shraddha even early on is a necessity for growth. Which is why before any kind of jnana in deep philosophy is given, the first step is upasana of Ishvara. That worship of Bhagavan first to purify this mind, then we can get to what this knowledge says. That's why the process is laid out the way it is. So that is chapter 4. So with that, we'll pause for now. If there are any questions, we can take them for the next 10 minutes. Anybody? Yes, Amma. School of thought, we can say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for the benefit of our, I want to call them Chitrakutis, but that sounds weird. Chitrakut members that are there, Chitrakutis. 2 parts to this question. One part being there are various schools of thought, even within that umbrella of Sanatana Dharma. How do we know what's right there? Second one is, in this day and age, when it comes to that questioning from our children and beyond, it's done in what can be seen as a disrespectful way. How do we address that? I'm going to turn your 2-part question to a 4-part answer, just because I can, I guess. So for that first question of school of thought, let's look at how they arose in the first place. First main reason for these different schools of thought is, when it comes to pramana, valid means of knowledge, what I consider the proper valid avenues to know anything, in the world it's based on perception. What I see, what I smell, what I touch, what I hear, seeing is believing to an extent, that is perceptive knowledge. Using that perception, I come to inferential knowledge. I'm driving by a mountain. I see smoke billowing from the other side of the mountain. Naturally, what is my inference that I make? There must be a fire on the other side. Can I see the fire? No. But I can make that inference confidently because in other situations in my life, wherever there is smoke, there has been fire. Therefore, that's the situation here as well. So built on previous perception, I come to inferential knowledge. Now, when it comes to the knowledge contained in Shastra, is a lot of it perceptive knowledge? Is a lot of it even inferential knowledge? It's what we call Shabda Pramana, valid means of knowledge based on the word that's in Shastra. Now, if I want to come up with different interpretations there, it's based on what is the word saying. I have to change definitions of certain words then. Don't I? There's that letter. It's called a Dear John letter. The same word order can be there. If you simply change the commas and the periods, one version of the letter looks like a love letter to your beloved. The other one looks like a breakup letter. Same exact word, same exact order. All you change is the commas and periods and capitalizations in a few places, completely changes what the meaning is. Like that, with Shastra, if I attribute a slightly different definition to a few words, that changes the trajectory completely. It's like when the astronauts were in Apollo 13 coming back to Earth. Everything failed. Their jets failed, everything. They were told, just keep the Earth in the little window that you have in your spaceship. Keep the Earth in there, and then you'll be fine. You're heading in the right direction. Away from a distance, keeping the Earth in the window is what they had to do. But even from that distance, way back there, if they move a little bit this way or that way, and they go full steam ahead, that's the difference between landing in Florida or landing in Kenya, isn't it? From that distance, even this much of a deviation does that. Same thing when it comes to different darshanas, schools of thought, where even a little bit deviation on definitions of terms changes what my sadhana process is, changes what the goals of this religion are at that point, changes what the outcomes are. When all of that is changed, it's like falling in America or Kenya at that point. So definitions oftentimes determine what these schools of thoughts are. The second is, what is the time period that they came in? You look at Madhva Mata, Ramanuja Mata, that which came after Advaita Vedanta, they were addressing a need for bhakti in the world. They were addressing different things. So based on the time period we live in, certain philosophies come into vogue, become popular at those times. So on schools of thought, then, when it comes to how do we know which one to follow when there's such a large variety of texts written, my personal view on this is, I haven't gone through all this text of all different philosophies. My conviction comes from the fact that Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharya Ji, the foremost exponent of Advaita Vedanta, our school of thought that Chinmaya Mission is a product of, he refuted any other kind of school of thought. Logically, he did that. It's been documented. So my Shraddhavan Labhate Jnanam, having that conviction and full faith that if he was able to logically defeat any other point of view, this must be the supreme point of view. And that's only been affirmed as I've studied incrementally. That's the first question. Second question, today's world, whether it's children or others, when they ask questions to their teacher, it's more like in a disrespectful way, not in that full faith way of learning. Every true believer who really makes progress on this path starts out as an ardent skeptic. Whether at the Balavihar level, like we see how the kids turn out when they're genuinely sticking to a certain point, not just trolling the teacher, genuinely feeling something. There's that atheistic phase they go through. And that kind of hunger for the truth, that finally leads them to embracing this religion. You look at Puja Gurudev, as Balakrishnan Menon, he went through that same process. You talk to 90% of the Swamis in our mission, they went through that exact same process as well. There was a point in high school, my mom and I would fight every single week. I'd say, I don't want to go to Balavihar, I don't believe what I learned there, not like I'm going to use it ever in life again, why can't I stay home? Every day we'd have this fight, every single Sunday. And something happened along the way, right? So that skepticism is necessary, but I will admit one thing, we are much more freer to be open with our objections, not attacking a certain viewpoint, attacking the person who's teaching that viewpoint. That's what we've turned into now. Where if you look at any of these debates that Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharya ji embarked on, it was always about fighting the philosophy, never making it personal about the person. This is not a primary debate where we go in character assassination in that quest for knowledge. Truth was supreme, not personal attacks. But because the way the world has gone now, we've conflated ideas with the people giving those ideas. We think attacking that person means we defeat their logic. That's what we've come to, sadly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a true teacher will not have insecurity. That, how dare you question me? A true teacher will never get that feeling. For them, it's okay. If there is a doubt that the person has, my duty as a teacher is to clear that doubt. If I cannot clear that doubt, either I have to go do research for it, either I have to recommend them, give them a referral to someone else, something like that I have to do. As a teacher, I can never have that insecurity of, oh, they're asking the question again and again, therefore that means they're doubting what I'm saying, that's a mark on my character. That's also ego at that point. That goes both ways then. And today in this world as well, we also find, as much as students are really attacking the person that's giving the knowledge, some teachers also, because they have a certain degree or a certain status and they wear something and they sit somewhere, because of that, it's, oh, how dare you question me? Anytime there are questions asked about this knowledge, it's questioning that Shastra. When that Bhagavan Krishna could entertain so many questions from Arjuna, who is anyone else as a teacher to feel like anyone's out of bounds when asking questions, right? That's what it comes down to. So with that, 1031, thank you so much for joining today. Wonderful to have you here. Elementary school lock-in this coming Friday. Following Friday, middle school lock-in. Following Saturday, high school lock-in. A lot of fun stuff coming up. 28th Saturday, this coming Saturday, we have Garba as well. So bring the kids, bring the whole family for it. It's not just about the 1 hour of Balavihar a week that makes a difference. These other events is where we stand as one family really comes to manifestation. Bring the kids, bring the family, bring the elders. Let's have a good time on Saturday. Okay. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.